talking about late Bronze Age, you're talking about a queen. Epics written before Homer about Medea. Medea is the central subject of them. So she's this Georgian queen. She's not native to Georgia, so we're on the east coast of the Black Sea. She's an immigrant, supposedly, from Libya. Her family is involved in developing antidotes. And there's another later Greek author I found too that talk about how this is the origin really of medicine, this whole dote and antidote thing. This is what medicine comes from. So it's fitting that her name is Medea, right, and has the root of medicine in it. For example, there's a reason that Moses has a box above which is the oracular voice of God, the highest, right? There's a reason they're using the same Saturnian titles. We get Satanism from that, this late Bronze Age Saturnian rite. So if you really want to express it most simply, Judaism and Christianity are the offspring of late Bronze Age Satanism developed under the Black Sea peoples who created the mystery religion that ultimately provided the soteria, the salvation. Again, it was through a woman, and the woman's savior, oracular savior at the time, who, by the way, is a granddaughter of the sun, and we get our term medicine from her name.
Welcome back to the Gnostic Informant, and you are about to attain true gnosis. And I'm with Dr. Amon, and you have some pretty interesting your studies in the New Testament and the ancient Greek mythology and the origins of the mysteries goes pretty deep, if I'm not mistaken.
It comes through the medicine, very concrete, right through the medicine. I'm the guy who was studying untranslated works of Galen that have to do with all the drugs that they're using and the ceremonies that they're having. So I come to it from a man of reason standpoint. And so, yeah.
Interesting. So I want to start off with, I was listening to another podcast that you were in with another gentleman. It was a really, really interesting show. And you guys were discussing a verse in Mark, in the Gospel of Mark, where it talks about the agony in the garden. Do you want to take us through basically what the Greek says, what you found out about this, where you're going? What is it that you see when you're looking at this?
Sure. So I saw that naked boy that was there with him. So Jesus is in this public park at 4:00 in the morning when he gets arrested with a naked boy. And the text says twice the kid was naked. Yeah. And it says that he was wrapped in a sindon, which in Greek I came at that from it's just a linen wrap. Right. But where I had seen it in context was in the context of applying drugs to self-made incisions. So we've got these people that Galen's writing for, because he's talking about all the antidotes they're using. And, he's even talking about stuff that Nero does. Nero's a whack job. But anyway, they take the linen bandage and they impregnate it with a drug or an antidote. And then they make slits in their skin and cover it with that bandage. And that is part of several different cult mysteries. And there's a whole vocabulary that builds up.
I thought of something real quick before we get into this. Let me just read the verse just in case anybody out there has no idea what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Let's just get everybody on the same page. So they all fled. They all left him and fled. Now a young man followed him wearing nothing but a linen cloth about his body. They seized him, but he left the cloth behind and ran off naked. And any church you go to, they just read past this like it didn't even happen. Who is this young boy Why is he naked? Why is he wearing a linen cloth? And what happens after this? It literally goes to the Sanhedrins. The next verse. He's in court. Yeah. They don't talk about it. It's a big mystery.
Abrupt transition from partying in a cemetery at 2 to 4 a.m. and to have the cops busted up. Yeah, one of them got his ear.
Right.
It got wild, right? And then people are taking off. Yeah. And by the way, the Greek text says twice that boy is naked. It emphasizes the fact that he's naked. And he's a Neoniskos, man. This is a kid who shouldn't be out. This is a kid who shouldn't be out. I mean, you only read about this stuff in like guys like Cyprian coming out of the cemetery with the viper venom drooling out of his butt, and the prostitutes running after him. Right?
Where is
this? Is crazy.
Explain this. Which myth is that you're talking about?
Oh, it's not a myth. It's Saint Cyprian. He was infamous for having, come back to the true path after having taken a detour with some prostitutes in a cemetery where they were using drugs that were drooling out his bum when they caught him. Yeah.
And when was this?
Yeah, when was this? Oh, don't get into the dates. Cyprian was like 3rd century or something.
Okay. And trying to get an understanding.
Somewhere.
So this is you think this is sort of a similar situation where they're doing some sort of rite? Is that what you're getting at?
Oh, well, the mention of the cop and the fact that, he's a Christos, right? So here, let me just reset the stage. Sure. He's a Christos. What is a Christos? You guys, I've watched some of your podcasts, and you guys are not going to know. Classicists are not, they can be pinned down on it. You can grab one like Rock and you can say, hey, where does this word come from, right? Christos comes from the verb chrio. And everybody jumps on it and says, anointed, Messiah. Yeah, no. Look at the very bottom. Go back to the Victorians. Go to Alice in Wonderland, right? Alice, who the editor of the Oxford Greek Lexicon, which is this beautiful Victorian. I mean, this thing's a masterpiece. I got to show you this online. You got to learn Greek, and I got to show you this online.
Yeah.
Anyway, in that definition for chrio, you'll notice right at the bottom where the oldest core is, it says this word means to be struck by the gadfly. To be struck by the gadfly, the oestrus in Greek. To be struck by the oestrus. And the Greeks have something. If you know the Sibyls, which we all do, we all read Enoch, who's the Son of God, right? Son of Man. Anyway, we know that the Christos is the one who's got the oestromania. The Sibyl, right? The Sibyl prophesies via oestromania. It's the strike of the gadfly.
What is the gadfly?
Yeah, well, you got an insect that lands on the butt of a cow and bites it, and the cow's like, right? And that's oestrus. Now, on the Scythian end, oestrus is the poison from the eos that the Scythians make and put on their arrows. And they're always kicking everybody's butt with these things. They're so good that they become the police force in Athens eventually. And they kill the Romans and take a standard. Anyway, but they use this poison, this oestrin, in the vocabulary. They use it within rite in order to induce a prophetic stage in the person, to have them be filled. I'm a graduate student, just freshly minted, and I'm working with a Chicago excavation at Tel Megiddo in Israel, the site of Armageddon. Right, so Solomon has a way station there where he taxes everybody, right? And underneath it, we're excavating And I'm working for that team. I was there for over a year. I'm working for that team, just doing grunt work, getting my feet wet. And I'm sleeping at nights in a caravan, group of trailers, off of the palace of Ahab, which is up yonder from Tel Megiddo. And so we're sleeping there. Jezebel's the Phoenician queen, right? Jezebel, Astarte, and the worship of Astarte and all.
Yeah, the Baal worship, all that, yeah.
Yeah. So we uncovered there. Our team was the one that uncovered the floor of the Canaanite temple that sits below all of the way station stuff. And it's a circular temple, and on that temple floor, these prophetic priestesses would do their thing. My introduction to Tel Megiddo and the process of Armageddon was intense and allowed me to see that there was his history in every place. We were literally sleeping in the vineyard of Jezebel, who is doing something called in the Septuagint is called calling down the fire of Uranos. Right?
Heaven.
Yeah.
But that was also a god in the Greek mythology, Uranos.
Yeah. And if you go back and look at the Septuagint, the word that he says is the heaven is the stereoma. He makes it in the beginning, and it's most people don't know it, but the STR root from words like oestrus, and from words like Saturnus, that these are part of a family. These are part of a linguistic family that shows itself in the Orphic and magic Chaldean work. So that you can see a strain. And linguistically, that's what I do. Just to introduce myself. That's what I do, is I follow those linguistic strains. Anyway, the stera, or the stereoma, that is in the first book of the Septuagint is a virgin. And if you look it up through the Victorian scholars, you can see, and the German scholars from the early 1900s were good too, you can see the Orphic influences on what you and I call the Jewish holy writings. So what do you do with that?
Yeah. That's the question, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I've come to, in my own digging or research, whatever you want to call it, I'm starting to notice that there's no lines between these different religious movements. Like Judaism isn't separate from any other of the Roman religion. They're all sort of borrowing from each other. They're all they're all trading with each other. These ideas are universal. It's not like Greek mythology is over here and Judaism is over here. You have these mysterious, these rites, these rituals, these agricultural myths, and they're being passed down, like you said, from the Chaldeans or Indo-Europeans, Scythians, whoever, and they're ending up in these myths, in these scriptures, and you see them and they relate to each other. The question is, what is the sort of what's in the middle? What's the core of all of it? That's what everyone's trying to get to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Why is synagogue a Greek word, right? I stood in a synagogue in northern Israel from the 2nd century BC. So don't get smart. It's BC, right? And what was there? A zodiac.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And what was written on the zodiac? It was labeled. It was Greek. There wasn't a lick of Hebrew in the place. And I try to remind my students, my seminarians, all the time. I try to remind them, hey, you got to realize that Greek is everywhere, that there is no Hebrew. You're not looking at Hebrew. That's why all of these documents are in Greek. And it's been that way for a long time. Yeah. Right? And if you want to look at the reason, you can talk to them. But you know all that history, and you know how the Koine spreads and whatnot.
Would you say that Alexander the Great sort of started that?
Yeah, but yes, I would. And I would tell an incoming freshman class, that's why Greek is the common language. But you see old stuff. I see old Greek that's as far as Spain,
Yeah.
right? And Mycenaean. I had the pleasure of working with Emmett Bennett, who cracked Linear B, and so I had a chance to look at Mycenaean Greek. And you wouldn't believe, how widespread. You think it's just on an island? No. It's so people are often confused. They think this world exists. That's this biblical world. What is the biblical world? It's like fairyland.
Yeah.
No.
Well,
no.
Linear B. When you look at Linear B, if I'm not mistaken, maybe I'm confusing with Linear A because I'm not an expert in this, but it almost looks like the Egyptian hieroglyphics in a weird way, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it doesn't look. Yeah, you're less scripty, definitely. Yeah, right. So yeah, you're dealing with more pictogramish kind of things. Yeah, but there's a system to it, and all you have to do is find a cipher and figure it out. And he did, and it was brilliant the way he did.
That's amazing stuff right there.
But the word Medea.
Let's get into that.
Medea is in Mycenaean, just like it is in Etruscan,
Medea is the anointer of Jason. And then another myth, her and Jason are arguing because she killed his family members, and then he begs her to have him back, and she's like, no, you should have loved them while they were alive. She's like, they make whoever, that's Euripides, by the way, Euripides Medea, they're making her out to look like some like demonic entity in that one. But in the Argonautica, she anoints Jason, and that's how he becomes the hero. But what is this Medea, Medusa? It's like you see the symbol of medical. It's like it's got the snakes around it. It looks like the cross with the serpent, the rod of Asclepius. What is all this symbolism with serpents and medical and Medea? And is there something in there?
Yeah, it's the history of the most genius woman that ever lived. In my opinion, in my humble opinion. So you're talking about late Bronze Age. You're talking about a queen, and there are epics. We know that there are epics written before Homer, that are composed, I should say, that are about Medea. Medea is the central subject of them. So she's this Georgian queen. She's not native to Georgia, right? So we're on the East Coast of the Black Sea. She's not. She's an immigrant, supposedly, from Libya, who was on an expedition with some general, Egyptian general. I forget his name. Anyway, they end up in Georgia, and anyway, her family is involved in taking people and experimenting with drugs on those people. So they're developing antidotes. And there's another later Greek author I found too that talk about how this is the origin really of medicine, this whole dote and antidote thing. This is what medicine comes from. So it's fitting that her name is Medea,
right,
and has the root of medicine in it, which, by the way, is really from mod. People think it's from med, which it is, but vowels don't mean anything.
Right.
It's the consonants that make the concepts.
Yeah.
And I try to tell all of my Greek students, I try to tell them right when they start, everything is being derived in ancient Greek from the verbs. So if you master the action of the verbs, then you can understand what they're talking about with the nouns and the adjectives that follow. So Medea there, we get our word medicine just from her name. She is the supposed founder of the Magi.
Wow.
She has this train of 12 Scythian women who control all of her drugs, botanicals, and whatnot, and prepare for her what she needs to be prepared. Her family is experimenting on.
She's an alchemist.
You could call her that. You could say she's the mother of alchemy more than that. But, she went to Italy. It's funny. She went to Italy And there was a dude there who had been bitten by one of the marsh snakes. And she was a foreigner, but they recognized right away what was going on, and they gave him an antidote. And the people were so enamored of her that they asked her to stay and be involved in the community. And ultimately, what came out of it was a temple to Angitia, and that means snake or serpent. It's a famous thing.
Now, is there a connection with her and Medusa, who has snakes in her hair?
Yeah. What are the Medusae? Medusae are guardians, right? They're temple guardians. And you see this with Medusae, dragons, and dogs, kuones, they call them, hounds. They're classes of temple guardian. And the Medusae, whose name literally means guardian or the judge of a place who executes its oikos, its running. So they're temple guardians. You see these in the Iphigenia at Taurus and Euripides, that Orestes can't, he's a murderer, and he can't, they don't worry about him being unbound because he's being watched by those with the feathers, the Medusae with the feathers. They've got the arrows with that toxin that'll paralyze you.
Wow. So is there, and now you mentioned these guardians, and right away I thought of Herodotus, where he talks about there's, and because you're talking about Georgia sort of being where the Scythians are, and Herodotus talks about there being gold guarding griffins up there. Where does that come from? Where's he getting that from? Do you have
he's going mystery and oracular, because you find the griffins and with the sphinxes.
Yeah.
And what is the black sphinx? We have in the place that I really think you could blow this up to show people what it is in concrete terms, to bring the myth down to the level of the history, is where we have in the PGM, the Papyri Graecae Magicae, the magical papyri. And in that, my professor, by the way, at University of Wisconsin, was one of the translators. He did all the medical incantations, and he was the first to tell me this translation is terrible, because it's difficult. It's difficult subject matter. Anyway, there's a black sphinx in there who takes a scroll with the burning purple written on it and inserts it into her vagina while forming her paiderastia. She's got a little boy with her, and he's involved in the rite that involves licking off the burning purple once she removes it from the scroll, from her vagina, from her colpos. It's an ancient act. They said Medea took her drugs from her colpos, which is her vagina. So, yeah, there's a whole.
So where what papyrus or where is this? Is there any physical copy of it? Is this being orally told? Where do we find this? Where does this come from?
If you want the black sphinx with her vagina and the scroll, you will go to the PGM in Book 4. It's right next to the hymn to the moon, because we are worshiping Diana.
Oh,
right?
is this the Orphic?
The Diwana. Yeah, of course it's Orphic. Orpheus was a student. Orpheus worked for Medea, right?
Yeah.
Most people don't realize that. Orpheus worked for Medea.
I think I have a copy of that hymn. There's a bunch of hymns to the moon, hymn to the sun, hymn to Demeter, hymn to... Yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah, in the Orphic hymns, it's good you have those.
Yeah.
Because that's where we have the first attestation of the Sotera, the savior.
Yeah.
It's a female. It's a female.
Yes, it's that. Isn't it? I'm not mistaken. Isn't it Demeter?
No, it is the combination. The combination of the choric mother, so Demeter, if you want to say Demeter there, the choric mother with the yes, okay, so the choric, it's the combination of the choric mother with the oestrus, which it uses all the time. You'll see it's translated as mania or something. With the oestrus using midwife, who is the type of the diwana. She has it's Mycenaean. She has the poison. Wanasa is a queen, right? She's literally the dea Wanasa, the queen goddess. You see her in a form in the Middle Ages, 1331 to be precise, as Aradia. The Etruscans called her the Aradia or the Aradewa. And so, who is this goddess? Yeah, is it Demeter? Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is she involved in the mystery with the burning off the mortality? You take that boy and you burn him up. They did a lot of
Christos too. The Christos. Yeah. So this is why I wanted to get you on here, because you have a type of mind where you're in all these areas like me. So let's slow this down for a second. Some people are probably like, "What the fuck are these guys talking about?" All right. There is a myth. Yes. There is a myth about Demeter. It is about Persephone being taken down to Hades. Or I'm sorry, I say Hades. It's Hades, right? Am I saying wrong?
Yeah, Hades. I say Hades.
Yeah. Okay. She's taken down to Hades, and Demeter she's upset and she wants to get her back. Well, she ends up in a town with these people who go to her and they say, "Will you nurse this child for us?" And she says, "Okay, fine, I'll nurse the child for you." And then she wants to make this child into a god, and she says that he is the Christos of the gods, the anointed of the gods, which is in the middle of nowhere. She just says this, and then she starts burning him at night. The weirdest thing you'll ever read in your entire life. But I want to hear what you think about this.
Yeah. You got to have that essence. It's the hyma, man. We translate hyma as blood, but in the Ezekiel, for example, we know that the hyma is the ejaculate. That's that stuff that 12-year-old girl wants that large Egyptian man to squirt on her. Now, I'm quoting Ezekiel, so don't get all YouTube censorious with me, you know what I mean? Because that's right out of the Bible. She's burning off his mortality, and she's transferring that hyma to him.
Now, why is she call him why does she call him the Messiah of the gods? Well, what's the point of that?
Because what is the mystery? Right? Christianity is a mystery. Everybody knows that, and they acknowledge that. Pope Leo came out and said, "Ignore that boy. He was cousin. And Mary's sex drugs are forgiven." What was that, the 5th century? I think it was the 5th to the 6th.
Wait, slow down. we have to accept. Who said this now?
So we're at mysteries, right?
Yeah.
And Pope Leo comes out and he answers the question because people are wondering about the naked boy. And he answers it by saying it was a cousin. So it's solved. And Mary Magdalene is officially pardoned for her possession of sex drugs. He says that.
When did
no, you didn't know. Did you know about Mary's dildo? Did you know about her dildo?
I did not know this. Where is this from?
Oh my God. She pulls it out and uses it on Jesus.
Where is this written down?
It's in the Bible. Nobody reads the Bible anymore. The alabastron. The alabastron, right?
She pulled the oil, right?
No, it's the container which you do this to create friction with the oil. You rub the oil on it, right? And we translate that into English as break, which makes no sense. Which makes no sense.
Can we go to this verse real quick so we can
let me finish. Yeah, if you want to go to it. Yeah. So she takes the ointment. Anyway, how do we know that it's Aristophanes, the comedian, the Greek comedian?
Yeah.
He trots out a Canisius, whose name means, I don't know if I can say this on YouTube, fucker?
Yeah, you can say it.
Okay. His name means fucker, and his wife's name means juicy. So, he, she's trying to, this is the Lysistrata. She's not having sex with him. And she comes out on the stage to try to get her demands met. And she's tempting him, with the alabastron. that's there. And because the alabaster uses sex in sexual rites, it's a dildo-shaped container that at times they just called the marble. Okay, the marble. Nonus does this when he's talking about Mary. Nonus is this guy, 5th, 6th century, who writes in Greek about a paraphrase of the Gospel of John. And in the Gospel of John, he talks about Mary's alabastron. And he has this wonderful scene where she uses it on Jesus, and he ejaculates, and she cleans him up with her hair. Yeah. You might see that. It says her hair is sexy, by the way. Wait, but before we get there, this is an ophite. This is an ophite practice of using the semen as the sacred communion substance, and they put it in their hair. I'm not kidding you.
Well, before you guys click away from this video because you're just like, what the hell are you talking about? There actually is documentation of early Christian sex denominations, such as the Nicenes, some of the Gnostics, some of the Valentinians, where this is coming from Irenaeus and other people who are accusing them as being heretics, but take it with a grain of salt. It does say that they are doing these weird rites that you just described.
And Neil, it says it in the Bible.
They're eating semen and all that stuff.
It says it in the Bible, in the canonical. It says it in the canonical New Testament. It's a revelation. What are those churches doing?
Yes,
they're following Nicolaus. They're following the guy.
That's what I was getting at. The Nicolaitans.
Yeah.
Those are the ones in the books against refuting all heresies. It says that the Nicolaitans were doing these weird sexual rites, eating semen, and
which they call the way of Cain. Jude calls it, and Peter calls it the way of Cain.
Well, the reason why I wanted to say that is wanted to establish that this is a thing that is being talked about already. Now, with that being established, where do you see this in Mark though, or in any of the Gospels? That's what. So
in John, he writes about Mary brings out the alabastron, right, which is that dildo that Nonus later describes as a sexual device.
All right, let's go to Okay, so it says
it gets even better. It gets even better. Right. Nonus also talks about the antidote that they tried to give Jesus on the cross because he had taken it's an antidote for the dipsas. The dipsas in Greek is just the way of saying a North African viper. It's a specific type of North African viper. Lucan says you can buy this venom in the Roman marketplace. So, they're using it, right? It's
some medical treatment. It's like a like you said, it's like a medicine.
Somebody's going to put it on a dildo.
Now where? I'm just trying to see where you're at with this. All right. So how do you interpret in John that this alabaster is a dildo?
I don't interpret it. That's what Nonus gives us. He says the antidote that we call the vinegar was an antidote for dipsas poisoning, which makes you really thirsty. It makes you really thirsty. That's why they call it a dipsas. And you cry out, "I'm thirsty," right? Jesus is doing that on the cross, right? So they try to give him vinegar. So if you think, okay, you've got one source, Nonus, that's saying this, and you think, oh, this can't be true. Wait a minute. Then you get the Geoponica. Have you heard of the Geoponica?
No.
It's a Byzantine manual. They usually call it a farming manual, but it's mostly a pharmaceutical manual. It's got an entire section by a guy named Julius Africanus and a guy named Zoroaster. Yeah. And it talks about vinegar being the antidote. The antidote. They call it vinegar. The antidote for this ritual drug that it is a venom-based drug. So there's multiple sources that talk about the pharmacology. Galen talks about that stuff that comes out of the prepubertal boy's penis when he's stimulated. And they talk about it with the girls too. There's an exudate. There's a word for the exudate of a virgin, right? So, and you have to know that the way that the Greeks classify the age groups. I heard one of your guests talk about a technon, and he got it wrong. But you have to know how they classify, and they classify around ages around puberty. So it all has to do with the bud and the flowering when you're productive, right? So back to that virgin that's in Genesis, the heaven is depicted as the stereoma, that virgin, that not yet brought forth individual. Pre-pubertal, on the cusp of puberty. How old is Medea in all of her appearances?
She's young, right?
Yeah. It says she's not quite ready for marriage, just on the edge.
She's like, what,
right?
16, something like that? 15?
Yes, yeah. What? No. They're already married and have kids by 16.
Okay, yeah, you're right. Good point.
Yeah, it's around puberty. As soon as it's considered, you give yourself a year for time to cycle, and then you're ready to have children. That's when you're an adult as a woman in antiquity.
So what's interesting about that is a lot of these Greek myths like to imitate nature when they talk about these deities, or not even just the deities, even just sometimes the people. And sometimes you get the impression that when they're talking about the young, ripe, I guess, preteen or whatever, they're trying to say this is like a grown flower in its prime before it starts to decay, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So Medea represents this like beautiful flower that's like hasn't been picked. It's just sitting there perfectly. And it's like, right?
That's the one that, Apollo wants. That's why we all get in our ships and we all sail over to Delos and we all watch this chorus of 9 to 12-year-old girls come out in their scantily, dressed wares, this gossamer stuff that you can just see through. We're used to this because we all compete nude when we're in sports and stuff like that. You know what I mean? It's not like a big deal.
Well, back then it was even less. Now it's where we have statutory rape laws and all that stuff because that's just where we're at. But back then this was not. Back then this was like it was normal. People just and older guys had young boys. Orpheus, by the way, in Ovid's Metamorphoses, one of the most popular books of all time. After Eurydice dies, what does Orpheus go do? It says that he takes on what does it say? It says he takes on the rights of prepubescent boys and plucking their puberty. And I'm reading this and I'm going, why doesn't anybody ever talk about this?
Yeah.
Orpheus becomes a boy rapist at the end of his life.
Hercules. Hercules was a big influence on him. And Hercules had his Ganymede, I mean,
yeah.
But it's a part of the deal, right?
Do you think this because these are Latin texts, this is going 1st century BC, 1st century A. I almost want to think like, is this sort of like a thing that's happening in the Mediterranean world? Like,
heck yeah. What about those Phrygian Baptists, man? What do you know about Baptists? You got to love those Baptists because those Baptists were doing their Phrygian rites with the boys, taking them out. And Juvenal tells us that they have cups that are shaped like penises that are involved because
I believe it.
The drinking from the penis, he says these men take out these young boys. This is remember the Phrygian mother? Remember the great mother?
Yeah.
I read about a kid who walked up in antiquity, right? Walked up, cut off his testicles. They had Lucian, right? Talks about the Phrygian festivals. Imagine this. It's public. He says sometimes people get swept up in it who are just watching it happen and will do the same thing. But he says the boys come out, the young catamites come out, and they offer their, with ceremonial swords, they cut off their testicles, and then they go through the town and they find a house and they throw their testicles into the house. And wherever the testicles go, that householder is responsible for equipping this new initiate with a female dress and makeup, cosmetics.
Wow. Now, okay, so you've written a book about this, if I'm not mistaken. You wrote a book about the hermaphroditic gods of the ancient world and how it relates to Jesus.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can you walk us through a little bit of that?
Sure. The place you got to start is with Venus, right? Or Aphrodite.
Yeah. By the way, who's also Lucifer, who's a male. So you have this is already a trans god right here. Okay, but go ahead.
The morning star, baby. You're right on the morning star. Beautiful stuff. So yeah, Venus. Ultimately, our oldest statues ever are ones with penises. And you see, if you look at what they call the androgyne, there's Greek terms for this.
Orpheus started the practice among the Thracian tribes of turning for love to immature males and of plucking the flower of a boy's brief spring before he has come to his manhood. Yeah, this is normal stuff back then.
Yeah, you can do that in pits in the ground. It's almost Mithraic, but it's really Herculean. They do the same things. They got their Ganymede. Yeah, they got their Ganymede. So, yeah, let's not be surprised at the Phrygian mother and her boys, right? So, yeah.
Attis is sort of a similar deity. Is that right? If I'm not mistaken.
He's a boy who loses his who gets castrated. Yeah.
Yeah.
They can hit that note, you know?
Yeah. Now, that being said, what do you think what do you think happens to all these rites? Do you think they get secretly put underground like you see in the Catholic Church? You see all this crazy, it almost looks like there's something happening. Like, I don't know, I'm just throwing stuff out there. What do you think about that?
Well, we know there's the catechumens rite that they're using in Alexandria that we see written about extensively. And we know the boys are stripped naked after 2 weeks of fasting. They're stripped naked, taken down into the undercroft, and one of the priests takes on the form of Lucifer, right? Because you have to have that temptation. Makes sense. They take off all their clothes. I'm not kidding. I wrote a book about this too. I'm pretty sure this book got me fired.
Fired from a university or something?
but you know, they said it was the student who saw me levitate through the dorm. But yeah, anyway, we have in this ceremony, and the Romans are arresting. The context is the Romans are arresting Christians for abusing orphans, right? So priests are taking orphans off the street. Bishops, elders are taking orphans off the street, subjecting them to this catechumen procedure, which we're told took weeks for them to talk them down from when they were finished. But in this procedure, they're presented with, in a way that is exactly the ancient mystery, strangely enough, with the communion and everything. They're presented with the devil's temptation. Now, if the boy, while he's being sodomized, they oil him down, right? There's all this funny ritual, and he says you shouldn't be worried about why you're naked, because Jesus was naked on the cross. So the whole time they're using this kind of grooming, having to do with Jesus. Jesus, you know, presumably goes through the same process. So there we have the boy being sodomized. And if the boy, while he's being sodomized, is able to scream out, is able to cry out, I reject you, then that boy's soul is cannot be contaminated by demons. And this is important. So remember, because the oracles, the children that are being used as oracles in antiquity, they have to be pure. They can't be maligned or abused. They can't have been sexually violated. So the Christians know, it's disgusting, but in Alexandria, they come out and declare, if a boy is violated, he can't be possessed by a demon, right? Because that's what the Pythia is doing. Remember, Pythia followed Paul around? People don't realize this, but one of these young girl prophetesses followed, who had the rank of Pythia. You don't understand. That's huge. That's like saying Vestal, right? They have their own friggin' temple, right? So she's following him around, yelling about him being the follower of the Christos. And I'm like, well, what's so bad about that? And this is in the book of Acts. And Paul gets pissed off at her.
Right.
Yeah, and then he gets thrown in jail, right? Because he's doing some exorcism. Paul, by the way, gets bitten by the viper and doesn't have any reaction, right?
Oh,
that should tell you something.
Wow, you're right. There's something going on there. So who is this lady now? The Pythia. By the way, Python is a snake,
right?
Which is like, why does it always have to be? It's like when you look at the linguistics of everything, you start to see where everything lines up. So the Pythian, the Python. Who is this girl, and why is she following Paul around? What happens with this?
Yeah, why is she following Paul? Because all she's doing is yelling about him being this follower of the Christ, right? And why does that anger Paul? Because technically he is, right? I mean,
yeah.
What's the problem? So if you look at the actual episode, he inhibits her power. So he performs an incantation and gets rid of her daimon. And the city is pissed off about it. And they throw him in jail for it. And anyway, they eventually beat him up.
What city is this? I'm just trying to. Somewhere in Greece, somewhere, right?
I don't.
I could pull it up.
The Pythia is following him around Ephesus. Maybe it was near Ephesus.
Okay, I think it is.
I can't remember right now. I can't remember. Just look. Yeah, just find the Pythia. She's there.
Paul in Ephesus. Okay. Well, Apollos was in Corinth. Paul and the slave girl in Philippi. Okay.
Oh, it's Philippi. Oh, is that where it is?
Here.
Oh, I didn't know.
Okay, so let's pull this up. Okay, here we go. One day, as we were going to the place of prayer, we met a slave girl who had a spirit of divination and brought her owners a great deal of money by fortune telling. While she followed Paul and us, she would cry out, "These men are the slaves of the Most High God, who proclaim to you a way of salvation." She kept doing this for many days. But Paul, very much annoyed, turned and said to the spirit, "I order you in the name of Jesus Christos to come out of her." And it came out in that very hour. But when her owners saw that their hope of making money was gone, they seized Paul and Silas and dragged them into the marketplace before the authorities. When they had brought them before the magistrates, they said, "These men are disturbing our city. They are Jews and are advocating customs that are not lawful for us Romans to adopt, to observe." The crowd joined them in attacking them, and the magistrates stripped them of their clothing and ordered them to be beaten with rods. So yeah, she was following them around, and this is in the city of Philippi, which is in Macedonia.
Well, what's so wrong? What's so wrong with calling somebody the servant to the Most High and the one who brings the soteria,
right,
the salvation?
What's going on there?
Yeah. Why so bad, man? Why have to call out her spirit, baby? That's low. That's a low blow. But you got to realize he goes through Asia Minor rebaptizing dudes that had been baptized by John. So and telling people, hey, you can't be involved in this idolatry, which is funny. We translate idolatry, but it's porneia, and they translate. The Victorians translated porneia as idolatry or fornication.
Are you serious? That's the word?
Yeah. Yeah. So what is idolatry / fornication, right? It's sexual rights, and the mysteries were known for that, with the temple prostitutes and everything.
Right.
So how is she involved in it? She's the Pythia who's having sex with the daimon, right?
Wow.
Right? She's that virgin that's taking in that form and is able to communicate. And he recognizes it and attempts to excommunicate it, which, evoke. They call that to evoke the source. They're doing this all the time. It's old, and it even goes back to it. I would argue you can look at the Chaldean oracles and say, 3000 BC, these guys were doing this kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Let me ask you this before we close this out. This has been a really interesting conversation. I want to get back to the Garden of Gethsemane for 1 second, because if I'm not mistaken, I think you've once argued that possibly there could have been a rite taking place in the garden that would medicate Jesus, a slow-acting drug that would put him into a coma before he went, because he goes to the cross right after that, the next day, right? Or within the next day or two.
No, within a very short period of time, and after his trial.
So the scene after the garden, she goes straight to the cross. He's getting arrested.
Well, he's got to get shuffled back and forth while they're trying to decide
within a day or two,
what to do with him. And in the meantime, he's building up this nasty thirst and becoming a little bit non-communicative. Yeah.
It says in the text in the garden that he's sweating profusely.
Right.
There's a lot of weird details happening here. Now, you think that there's some sort of argument here for what is it called? The swine theory?
The swine theory.
Swoon theory, I think it's called. Where it says Jesus didn't actually die, but he was close to death.
Oh, no, I think he was dead because the Romans who were guarding him, when they went to break his legs, he was already gone. And when they poked him, all that water came out. So it wasn't surprising that he was standing there screaming about being so thirsty. He had that stuff on his head. All I'm saying is we have to look at the evidence. And this is evidence straight out of cult. He is drinking the cup. He takes the cup of the highest. He takes the cup of God, right? What is that? You got to remember in the apocalypse, right? In the context of Armageddon, that cup is what the great whore of Babylon gives her antichrist, her mystery of iniquity, it's translated, right? It's a cup of her porneia. It's actually her sexual juices. It says that. So when Jesus is in the garden and he's taking the cup of God, he's taking something in that results in, all of these kind of very culty. They're using the same terminology for it. I mean, they're even talking about the antidotes and what he would be given. So, yeah, is there a communion? Yeah. Do the Ophites who were around doing this, are they using that communion? Yeah. Or do the Nicolaitans? Yeah. Are the early Christians having to sort out what rites they're going to do and what rites they're not going to do, and whether or not they're going to follow the Magi, right? Because that's what Simon is doing. Yeah. Simon is doing that Chaldean stuff, and they're saying, no. This is now we're not going to go that direction now,
and it's
right?
the Magi who finds him at his birth, which is like they're there from the beginning, so you can't say they're not a part of this thing.
Right.
Just wanted to get that out there, but hey, man, this has been a really, really fun conversation, and I want to have you back on. We could keep digging deep into all this stuff. This is fun for me. Anything you want to promote while you're any books coming out? Anything you want to? Any websites you got going on? You want to let everyone know about?
No, I'm not going to promote anything. I'm just going to tell people, read the Bible and learn some Greek. Learn some Greek. That's the one thing I do. Yeah. Is get that instrument so that you can function within this world. What I love about what you're doing, Neil, is you're bringing back the sources, and you ask beautiful questions. And sometimes the people that I've seen that you interviewed can't keep up with the question, but your question is the most important question. There's a reason. For example, there's a reason that Moses has a box above which is the oracular voice of God, the highest, right? There's a reason they're using the same Saturnian titles. We get Satanism from that, this late Bronze Age Saturnian rite. So if you really want to express it most simply, Judaism and Christianity are the offspring of late Bronze Age Satanism developed under the Black Sea peoples who created the mystery religion that ultimately provided the soteria, the salvation. Again, it was through a woman, and the woman savior, oracular savior at the time, who, by the way, is a granddaughter of the sun, and we get our term medicine from her name.
Yeah.
So
and the same symbol.
Do with that what you...
The serpent symbol, too.
Yeah.
Rod of asleep. And another thing I noticed before, and I know we're closing out, but real quick, I noticed that around that same time period that you're talking about, when this Hellenization breaks out, you get all these soters, Ptolemy soter, Antiochus the soter, Demetrius the soter, all these different soters. They're all saviors.
Yeah.
So it's like...
And Alexander's mommy...
Yep.
And Alexander's mommy having intercourse with the snake so that she can produce... So that she can produce Ammon. No, it's just she can produce Ammon, the son of Ammon. And the dude goes down, Alexander goes down to the oracle at Cyrene to ask Ammon.
Yeah.
Right? He's the son approaching his father through snake sex with his mother.
By the way, who begots him? It literally says in the Greek Alexander, I have begotten you as my son. In the same way that you see in the New Testament, where Jesus is baptized in the desert, just like in Siwa, in the desert where there's water and oasis. The same thing happens. He gets begotten by the God. It's so mind-blowing that this happens. They're both saviors. It's just really, really crazy. Really,
the oracle told us in the garden, it's the enmity that's being put between the serpent's seed and her seed.
Yeah.
Right? It's oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, you want that tree of knowledge? Your eyes would be open. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
well, this has been great. Like I always say, you have just attained true gnosis.